This is the unstructured product overview in 30 minutes. The first part is basically talking about an introduction to retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So really, we do see that kind of situation where you're like chatting with your company's internal data to really rise at a really fast growth rate. As you can see in this graph here, we're looking at a compound annual growth rate of almost 40% from last year over the next 5 years. So you can see it's just growing huge to potentially a market of around $11 billion. What problems does RAG solve? As you can see in this little cartoon here on the right, without RAG, without having these AI models go and train itself on all the data, you might say, what's the social media platform that has the blue bird logo? This is obviously a very simple question, but AI might respond, Twitter. Well, yeah, that's kind of true, but as you know, Twitter kind of turned into X over the past few years. And so by feeding it more up-to-date information, then the chatbot is going to give you, more up-to-date information and actually answer X instead of Twitter. So again, that's great, but what does RAG solve for the enterprise? Again, these large language models, or LLMs, are basically the brains behind AI. They have a way of being able to take text and other information and be able to chew through it pretty quickly and give you answers. And so really what RAG solves is it's able to grab your company's information, your proprietary information, and give that as context into these LLMs. It allows you basically to also practice enterprise best practices, such as making sure that only certain people have access to the right information. You may have, for example, a research and development team inside your organization, and you want to basically make that information only accessible to certain folks on your engineering team, but it might not yet be ready, for example, for your sales team to digest and begin sharing with customers. And again, RAG is the dominant pattern for chatbots, et cetera. It's a very well-known area, and it's an area we play very well into. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, it's really the dawn of what we call the agentic era. And agents are a way of not only working with RAG, but chaining together a series of steps. So it's not just question and answer, but you can have it do a whole bunch of additional tasks. You can think of it like a virtual assistant that can go around and do multiple tasks, many of them on their own, based on the information you retrieve. So let's dive a little bit deep, but not too deep, into what RAG is. So again, RAG takes these LLMs with real-time retrieval of your data. So what you see in the right-hand corner, you see this green icon that says documents. Basically, that's your company's data. It could be digitized PDFs, it could be spreadsheets, it could be images, it could be multimedia content, just really basically any type of data out there that your company has that you want to unlock insights from. And then what we do is we basically take and ingest that into Unstructured. Unstructured will read through those documents and tag all of the information semantically, so it knows what a table is and what an image is. You'll find that many of our competitors will also ingest similar documents. But what we find is many of these competitors just produce just a plain text optical character recognition of the data. Or they'll bring the data out, but they will only semantically target with Markdown. So it'll tell you that something is bold or italicized, but it won't tell you that it's part of a table, or it won't tell you what the relationship of some of the text is to each other. So right away, that is one competitive advantage that Unstructured brings. It can semantically annotate the information it gets out of the documents, already giving context and meaning to your downstream LLMs and RAG applications. We can also chunk that information up so that it can be retrieved quicker. by RAG. I like to say that if I gave you the book War and Peace, which is maybe like 1,500 pages, and I was going to ask you to summarize what's in chapter 4 of the book, you'd have to take a long time to flip to chapter 4, then look at chapter 4 and give me information. But if we can chunk that information into chapters, you can more quickly look it up. From there, we take the chunks and we can also add what's called vectors. And vectors are simply series of numbers. Computers work with numbers a lot easier and faster than words. Humans tend to work with words faster, but computers like to work with numbers faster. And these vectors are built in such a way that these numbers can tell you how the words relate to each other. A simple example might be the word duck. And so a vector can tell you that in this context, a duck is an animal versus maybe the Oregon football college sports team. And so that's what vectors do. And they allow you to get answers a lot quicker and with more context and delivering business insights that are more detailed. And again, we put all that information typically into what we call a vector database. A vector database is similar to a regular database, but a vector database can work with these numbers a lot easier and faster. And so then when a user submits a query, sometimes we call it a prompt, to something like a ChatGPT or Claude, it will then go in and turn that user's question also into a series of numbers. And then it can compare those groups of numbers to very quickly get you back an answer. So it'll find the top chunks. It will develop a prompt, a response, and then it will give it to the user. And so that's basic RAG. And again, a simplified way of looking at this is you fire up your computer, you launch something like Claude, you say, hey, tell me what are the top selling products for the Western region for our company in 2025 to date, and it will come back and quickly give you an answer. We also have something called advanced RAG. You can have LLMs that are doing a lot more than just breaking down information into component parts. You can add things like user intent, signaling, semantic keywords, and also you can be doing anti-hallucination, citation calculations before the answer ever gets to the customer. Today, in kind of simple RAG, you're kind of firing and forgetting, and you get an answer back, and it's up to you to determine whether, what you're seeing is actually grounded in truth, or maybe a mistake was made in the calculation upstream, but you won't see that until it gets to you. In advanced RAG, we have a way of trying to determine common fallacies and problems in reasoning up front, increasing the likelihood that you'll get a more truthful answer all the time. And we can also give you citations in advanced RAG. So if you're not quite sure or you want to prove that the information is correct, we can tell you exactly where we got the information from, and you can do your own research if you need to. When we talk about agents, again, we are telling an agent, for example, hey, go look up this information. If this information comes back with certain characteristics, maybe I want you to take further action. Like maybe I want you to then cross-reference a company's 10K statement and cross-reference that and give me more semantically grounded information. Or maybe if the information comes back and it's very promising, could you go and automatically try to schedule an appointment with a customer so that we can talk about the findings? So that's what agents are doing, and they're using all these familiar tools, but also doing things like storing information in memory and referring to it later if needed, and or doing some sort of like what we would call reflection or criticizing its own work and things like that. So agents really take this whole kind of question response sort of algorithm and then really kind of tries to improve it by doing what a human would do, basically. And so again, we have what we call, maybe back in 2020, what we call naive RAG, which is really just you're asking questions and getting answers and hoping that the answers are right, stepping all the way up till today where we're actually doing self-reflective RAG and now agentic RAG. In fact, there are now up to 25 different types of RAG. there's reasoning RAG, there's sparse RAG, and this is, again, another eye chart, so you don't need to read it all. But just to know that we are developing very rapidly in this space, and Unstructured is primed to take advantage of all these types of RAG. We do that very easily, very quickly, at scale, and with security in mind. So let's move on to part two. One of the things that we have customers asking us a lot about is what we call intelligent document processing, or sometimes referred to as IDP. Now, in the first part I showed you was RAG, where you're basically asking questions of data and you're generating responses, or you're having an agent based on responses feed it into the next part of your process. But recently, we've introduced some new features that allow you to do intelligent document processing, and that's something we're getting increasingly asked by our customers about. So let's take a few moments and talk about that. By the way, intelligent document processing, the market growth for that is very similar to what we talked about in RAG, and even more so. I think we talked about something around the order of magnitude of about 11 billion in 2030 for RAG. We see 12 billion or even more in the IDP space by 2030, growing at almost the same amount of rate. I think it was about 38% for RAG, and we're looking at about 33% for IDP. So really, customers are not only asking for this, but there are great opportunities to even grow into this market if you're not in it already. And again, you'll see that Unstructured does a great job of that. What we'd like to do is maybe push the items at the bottom of this iceberg up towards the top. We want to take that 80% of your unstructured data and get it into that 20% structured part. And the reason we want to do that is it's much easier to, for example, extract everything about a customer from all the different pieces of information you have in your system about that customer. That customer's information may be in emails and Slack messages, in Word docs, in Notion pages, in HubSpot, in Asana or Linear or something like that. And so what we want to do is say, hey, if we know the customer's name or the customer's unique identifier, we can get all that information into one space. And it's going to be much easier not only to do RAG work on it, but to do our traditional document processing work like database queries and things like that. So here's an example of IDP at work. On the left-hand side, you'll see a handwritten form that, most companies have versions of these forms. It could be out on the loading dock. It could be in a patient waiting room. It can be a sales rep filling out a form. And although most of these are typed, some of these are handwritten, of course, as well. What's important here, though, is we want to get that information out into a common format. And as you'll see on the right, Unstructured does a real good job about using a sophisticated mix of optical character recognition, vision language models, large language models, AI prompting, et cetera, to turn it into structured data on the right. In fact, it does more than that. The customer itself can say, hey, this policy or claim number needs to be output in a certain way, or the subscriber ID takes a certain format. Or, we don't necessarily care for our use about the person's employer. We just want to scrape their basic information. And so they can define, they can tell Unstructured just the information they want to pull out and how they want to pull it out and in what format they want to pull it out. And again, this is where intelligent document processing really shines. So again, we want to try to take that unstructured data, get it into a structured format, and we do that to unlock information. Maybe we want to upsell to certain customers based on their history, and we can do that pretty quickly if we get that into a structured format. For your structured data, we can cleanse that even further, and maybe there's new automation possibilities. Maybe you want to take the information that comes in and you want to feed it into upstream systems that are highly tailored towards your structured data already, and we can get that cleansed, we can get that transformed, et cetera. Let's go to part 3 now and tell you a little bit more about Unstructured as a company. We started out as an open source product, a free open source product with very limited capabilities. And so we have basically gone out to a number of investors and a number of third parties to really try to productize this, to add new features that customers are willing to pay for. And just over the past 3 years or so, we've been able to raise over $65 million in funding. We are making inroads into the market at a very fast clip. And an overwhelming number of the Fortune 100 and 1000 are using us in either a free or paid capacity. And we hope to continue bringing features to companies for years to come in that regard. A lot of customers will come to us, some out of curiosity, but many out of desperation, because they're trying to do this work on their own. They're trying to build the kind of systems that Unstructured are building. And we call it the rat's nest. A company will come along and say, hey, I was able to take my engineering team of a couple of folks and go out on the internet and find, a very limited piece of coding functionality that turns my PDFs into text. Well, that's great. But again, Unstructured is really going to excel at giving you contextualized information and not just the raw text. We're able to connect to third parties of record where you have all of your information. We're able to deliver those results also to popular third parties of record. To do all of that work, chunking, embedding, generating all those numbers for AI, everything else quickly overwhelms many engineering departments. And even when they get there, they start worrying about things like, well, this is great, but now we have to worry about security. Maybe we're required by GDPR or by HIPAA to be compliant. What does that mean for our solution? And so very quickly, engineering organizations are getting overwhelmed and very challenged and coming to us saying, we're willing to pay you for your expertise, for your years of knowledge in this space, for your technology, and for frankly, the ease of use. We can't maintain this stuff. And we provide them with a turnkey solution. And so they don't have to deal with the rat's nest anymore. So again, to kind of simplify that last slide, we take your systems of record, we convert that into AI-ready data, we'll put that in the database, allowing you great observability and retrieval with your LLMs. And we use all of the industry standard models out there, companies such as Amazon with their Bedrock models, Anthropic, and others with their models, OpenAI, et cetera. And so we have a lot of proprietary logic and a lot of proprietary features, but we also rely on the best and brightest models out there. So you can be assured that we're using technologies that have been tried and tested by millions of other customers. This chart here basically shows you that we can connect to over 20 different source connectors. So whether you have your information in, say, Notion, Google Drive, Databricks, Snowflake, IBM, on and on. We're able to ingest all of your different files and data from those sources. And again, get it ready into AI data through our transforms, enrichments. Enrichments are just additional add-ons to unlock even more information about your data, along with our third-party integrations. And we deliver that into, again, over 20 different destinations. So whether you want us to put that into a PostgreSQL database or a Databricks Delta table or a Snowflake Iceberg tables, et cetera, we've got you covered.
Let's round out today's presentation with a product demo. Now, what most companies will start off with is some prototypes by selecting a document from their corpus of information that most represents their target data. In this case, we'll keep things simple and generalized by using this real estate PDF flyer. It has some basic information on it. So here, I've logged into Unstructured, and in the user interface, I'm going to simply select on the start page the real estate PDF sample file. Unstructured will now begin transforming this file into a series of what we call document elements. For example, if I switch on this Show All Bounding Boxes feature, I can see that Unstructured has identified things such as images, titles, and other text on the page. and a formatted representation of the partition data is on the right. By clicking Update Results, I can do a second pass to get even more accurate results. Once that's done, I can click the JSON button to see the actual AI-ready data. For example, you can see for this title, the document element of type title is created. We have not only the text, but information about this element is captured in the metadata. In this case, things such as where the information was found, how big the bounding box was, the language of the text, the page number, and so on. For intelligent document processing, I can then click the Extract button. I'll need to tell Unstructured what format or schema I want to use to output the data. I can use this visual designer if I know exactly the names of the elements, the relationships of each element in the schema to each other, the data types, and so on. The nice thing here is we also designed Unstructured for non-technical users. So if you know what you want, but you're not familiar with JSON schemas, that's okay. Click the Suggest button. Tell us what you want. For example, the property's address, listing price, agent contact details, features, and so on. Then click Generate Schema. Unstructured uses AI to determine a schema for you. Then run the schema. Unstructured then uses the schema against the source data to extract the information in the format that you specify. Here's a human-readable format, and here's a more machine-readable format. And here's the data that was extracted. Notice that in addition to extracting the information as traditional titles, uncategorized text, images, etc., we've now extracted the data in the format that you specify, such as the property address, agent contact information, property features, and so on. When you're ready to move this into production, simply click Create Workflow. Unstructured now switches over to its Workflow Designer, where you can specify things such as the remote source of your information, the destination to put all of the processed data, a strategy to use for initially partitioning the data, enrichments such as summarizing the contents of images, improving the accuracy of text in non-traditional formats such as vertical instead of horizontal presentation, outputting the contents of tables in HTML format, and performing that intelligent data processing that we saw earlier. Unstructured gives you powerful point-and-click tools to design your workflows with ease and speed. And all of the features that I've just shown you are available as an API as well, for those who want even more fine-tuned control over their design and execution. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. To learn more about Unstructured, you can visit us at unstructured.io. If you have questions, reach out to your Unstructured sales representative or contact us through one of the links at this website. Thank you.